amazing wisdom,
entrepreneurs,
business leaders,
success,
CEOs,
amazing success
around the world.
This is the Success Nuggets Podcast. Have you ever wondered what you could learn and how inspired you'd be if you asked incredible people from around the world about the patterns that drive progress? Get ready to dive into a world of insights and inspiration. This is the Success Nuggets Podcast with the founder of the Digital Light Bulb and your host, David Abel.
From immune storms as a small kid to leading with love as an adult, our next guest, Chiron Yang, has turned pain into a practical playbook. On today's show, how curiosity, nature, and a little astrology refined everything. Chiron, welcome to the Success Nuggets.
Hello, Dave. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you. It was great meeting last week as well. Can we start with your headline of your childhood health story, please?
Sure. I was diagnosed with autoimmune skin condition. It's called atopic dermatitis, to be formal, or eczema. At the age of 3, and then it starts to get worse at 5, and then that's when the series of going to the doctors to get checkups, to be diagnosed, to get a solution and an answer. And then by the time I was 8, doctors said that I have to be medicated my whole life with steroids and antihistamines. I had asthma as well, so it wasn't just applying steroids on the body, it was basically inhaling them as well. So I basically grew up as a kid with being drugged until I was 16, and then I decided, let me take my health in my own hands. Let me decide, and then I'm just going to throw away all my drugs and trust something called a natural healing process. Something that we Chinese really know because of our background in Chinese medicine.
Without being too clinical, my son had mild asthma, a mild eczema. I had a baby eczema as well, and I used to really itch myself. It was quite nice, but I just sort of stopped one day, and I actually walked my son to school this morning, and I said, do you remember being itchy? And he said, yeah, it was so annoying. Is there any way you can sort of explain how week to week that kind of felt? What was your body telling you?
Oh my God, I would describe itch more painful than pain itself, right? So I would scratch myself all night, even while I was asleep, and you see blood on the bed sheets. Then the hard part after that is going in the shower where you have an open wound and you shower and it hurts. And then when it starts itching, the more you scratch it, the more itchier you get. And then it's uncontrollably. The crazy thing is that when you even start to become an open wound, you still want to scratch it even though it hurts. You're actually activating more histamines going on in the body. And that makes things more inflamed and more itchy. And, because of that, at a very young age, I had to learn something called meditation, even though I had no formal training. Just being patient, breathe, and that's all I knew.
As you sort of alluded to there, as you got to 16, I think you probably sounded like you were a bit fed up. What was your first, if it doesn't work, change it kind of moment and experience then?
So it was very interesting because I was on the badminton court and pretty competitively too as well. And the most frustrating thing about having a skin problem is that when you start sweating, it starts itching. And because I'm such a competitive guy, this thing is removing my focus. And I couldn't get myself into the game, into the zone. And because of that, I will find myself losing the game. And that frustrates me a lot. Now, the craziest thing about anger and frustration and irritation on the emotional level, it shows up in the skin as well. So one day I was just playing the court, and then I just have a losing streak. You know what? I'm done with medication. What if I stop medicating and see what happens, right? We have been looking for doctors ever since I was 5. And by that time, it was like 10 plus years. We did not just see conventional medicine. We also went to different countries to see traditional Chinese medicine. And there was one thing that stuck with me at the time. It was like, hey, why not try natural remedies? And then having an idea, if you detox all the toxins from your body, maybe something will heal, something will happen. So at that time at 16, I decided to make a call, without my dad's permission. And it was such a big deal because I'm such a nice kid that really just listened to the parents, thinking that that's respectful, but sometimes being obedient means sacrificing your own inner wisdom. So at that time, out of pain, my inner wisdom was just screaming at me. It's like, hey, stop this thing. It's not working. You tried it for 10 years. Throw it in the bin. See how things go after that.
It probably seems a lot different now. I do understand the Chinese family and the respect you have for your elders as well. Our first series on the Success Nuggets was called Patterns That Create Progress. So you've become your own detective and the natural remedies. What were the first sort of natural remedies that gave you just a meaningful, measurable change in your condition? Were we talking breathing or diet or something different?
Yeah, definitely diet is one of the biggest thing when it comes to, tackling any autoimmune situation and something where the body harms its own self. Back in the days, I didn't know I had something called leaky gut, and we are supposed to take care of the microbiome of the gut. But at that time, that was my first exposure that if you eat too much wheat or sweet stuff, then you can get this overload of candida in your gut, and then basically that can cause a lot of turbulence in the skin and so on and so forth. So that was the first thing that we shifted, is to introduce probiotics and prebiotics. And in terms of my diet, I completely stopped eating out, meaning no processed food, no additives. At home, my mom cooked everything. It was just salt and very clean. I still have some meat and not a lot of rice. Just change what you eat in terms of diet. Your body responds.
No, it's a great message. Well, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
As we fast forward through your 20s, you've lived in many cities as well. I believe you lived in London for a little while. Where did astrology join the chat?
Astrology joins the chat when no matter what physical remedy that I tried to work on, it did not completely go away. I'm still itching. I'm still suffering internally. And growing up as a teenager, I was known as the guy with the red face because it's all inflamed. I had low self-esteem and there was a lot of shame and I was so self-conscious, and the way I compensated with that is through academics, through being good at grades, being good at sports as best as I could in everything, and I became even more competitive than before because of some self-belief that I'm not good enough. So I'm completing A-levels in the United Kingdom and I got myself into Imperial College of London doing math, fulfilling Dad's dream of his ideal son. I think the transition from high school to university is a big gap. So when I was there, I just felt so frustrated with the education. I had always excelled in math, but when I got to uni, and then that was the first time I did not know anything about math. And always being someone who succeeded well in academics, feeling like a failure for the first time scared me to shits. And remember, I have low self-esteem.
Do you think this sort of brought it back on again a little bit?
Yeah, it brought it back on. So the flare-up came back. And that was my first experience of psychosomatic relationship. The skin disease has some mental, emotional component to it, widely known as stress. If you're stressed, something in your body will start to have some form of physiological response, because I actually felt it in my body and I was just like, oh my God, I can't go on anymore. And I decided to take a gap year. So during the gap year, I was thinking, and this is not who I want to be. This is not what I want to do. And I felt a lot of shame leaving the school, because when I spoke to my counselors and say, hey, look, I'm going through this thing. And they weren't very helpful with mental health. They say, hey, look, if you quit now, you end up in the streets, or you can choose to stay on and you're going to excel and you're going to have a really successful life. And I was like, that's bullshit, right? So anyway, I called my dad, I left, and I spoke to him and humbly told him that I can't do this anymore. And that was when I started to look into philosophy. Just trying to understand life, because I feel when I leave that school, the old narrative of go into a good school, get good grades, excel in it, get a bigger certification of a paper that you're amazing, and get a good job, get a good wife, and get married, and so on and so forth. That whole narrative just broke down, and I don't know who I was anymore. And I wasn't able to associate, good grades with my sense of worth anymore. So during that time, while I was lost, my mom was basically starting to go into the new age spiritual path, learning to meditate, energy healing. And one of the teachers that came about was someone teaching about astrology. And she recommended me to meet with her to speak about my path. So I had my first reading, was about 3 hours long. And in that moment, when I was just looking at the chart, astrology chart has a lot of different things in it. Looks like alien language. The symbols attracted me, because when I look at the symbols, I just this moment of, wow, I remembered everything. I could memorize all the symbols. It came natural for me. It almost felt like a remembrance. And it was life-changing for me because she told me I'm never meant to walk a conventional path anyway. And the reason why you were sick, it was a calling from something bigger than you, something beyond what you can understand, to realign your path to a path that's more authentic, that aligns to your dharma or your purpose. And at that time I was 21 and I never spoke about my own internal world with anybody. And for the first time, someone outside of me was able to articulate in detail what's going on inside of me. That was something there, and I decided to explore it. That's where astrology came in.
That's brilliant. I mean, at 21 as well, even at people in their 30s, 40s, 50s, they can be skeptical. So how you use that as a reflective tool at a young age, rather than the prediction of you must go to university. And in those days, we didn't really have much on mental health, right? I remember
Yeah.
being a buzzword, and I've got bad mental health. And then all of a sudden everyone had bad mental health. And then I think we just realized that anxiety is part of the game, stress and life and overworking. So what happened next then? What happened with your career? What was the next steps?
I tried to go back to university because I wasn't convinced by that I was giving up if I quit. I was so caught up in that loop, in that belief. And even though I knew I had a guidance from the astrologer that, like it or not, life is going to bring you there. And following the framework of Hero's Journey by Joseph Campbell, there's a part that the hero just refused to accept the call to adventure. So I reapplied to University College of London and basically tried another year there, which led to an even bigger outbreak of my skin, to a point that I couldn't even continue to do anything else. And that was 2014. By the time I was already 24. So I was like, I failed again, right? And after that is that I started to reapply to a different university in the US to learn things like psychology, philosophy, spirituality, and mythology, something that I've always been so interested in. And while at that time, there was a funny story because I didn't want to leave London because it was home, right? All my friends were there, what I've known was there, and my my routine was there. Then one day when I tried to go back to the UK, the customs stopped me. The customs stopped me, even though I had a valid visa. I had a valid reason to go in, and everything was fine. And they say that, hey, you've been coming in and out. You're no longer in school anymore because you left. You decided to leave, right? You're not allowed to come in. So they deported me while all my belongings were still in the UK.
Wow.
I got kicked back by the universe. And that was the same year in 2014, that summer. And that's it. Life as you know it is gone. So I had a saying after that experience, like, okay, if you don't do it by yourself, you don't initiate something that you know you should be acting upon when it's authentic and it's aligned. If you don't do it, the universe is going to do it for you. And when the universe does it for you, the experience is way much worse. So after that, I went to the US, spent 5 years over there. While I was 5 years over there, I completed 3 things, right? My degree in the university, in psychology, philosophy, and religious studies. I've completed a coaching course that's backed up by wilderness therapy, by the way, that helps with addiction and people with serious mental health issues, and they heal through wilderness therapy. And there's a coaching modality that does that. And then I also finished a professional astrology course all at the same time with a span of 5 years, plus visiting Peru and South Africa, the shamans, and being really wild and connected to nature again to find the truth of what true healing is all about. So in that short 5 years, life profoundly changed, and I had no roadblocks anymore. Interestingly, yeah.
Yeah. Just always so blown away, especially the hero's journey part. It feels like a little bit. So tell us a bit about nature. I mean, nature changed my life after 20 years in cities. I lived in London, Dubai, in Ho Chi Minh City, in Vietnam, very, very busy places. And it was only after I moved out of those cities that a few years later, I started to get a bit of peace. But going to see shamans and getting off the beaten track, now that's something different, isn't it?
Completely. When I'm a city boy, I grew up in Kuala Lumpur. So the things that we are taught as city people, that nature is dangerous. That's why we don't go to it. That's as far as separated we can be from nature, because nature is who we are. And if you see in a dictionary, right, if you find the definition of nature, you will never find humans to be included in the definition of nature. Now, isn't that interesting? So that belief had always pushed me away from nature. But when I arrived the US in 2014, September-ish, after the summer, it's Colorado. It's full of greens and wildlife. And to me, that was the very first time I felt like at all the grandiosity of nature's energy on me. It made me feel so peaceful. And right away, the kind of stress that I had in the city is completely different from what I had there. So I got so interested with the whole concept of nature, was able to heal. And at that time, I was really lonely, and I was really timid and scared to make new connections and friends as well. So I spent most time in nature, meditating, connecting. And what made me realize is that when I'm alone in nature, I don't feel lonely. But when I'm with people that is inauthentic, that is has no ability to drop down to their body and speak to you from presence, I feel loneliness really has nothing to do with whether you're around with people or not. It's really about the disconnection of the interaction between people. And naturally, I went into the state of inquiry in nature. And I always, every expedition I go, come back with more answers and more clarity about who I am and what I'm here to do and what I'm supposed to be. The drive to go to Peru is because everybody there in Colorado, Boulder, is talking about plant medicine, is talking about psychedelics, is talking about something that we have to experience at least once in our life. And I had a strong pulling to go, let's just go find out what they're trying to say. I was just thinking to myself, maybe this could heal my condition once and for all. And I could prove the doctors wrong when they say I didn't to be medicated my whole life. Maybe there's something that will just change everything that I've known. So I decided to do it, and I went there by myself. And when I land there at the space where we did the healing for a month in Peru with the shamans, I'm a complete stranger. But by the end of the month, I'm family with everybody. So nature is a big component to healing. And when we can truly reconnect to nature and harness the raw primal energy that is there, right? When we come home to who we truly are, healing just happens.
I love it. I love it. You did get caught, didn't you? You just end up there going, what am I doing here? I love it so much. What about the sea and the power of the ocean?
You know what's funny? That every natural places that I've gone, it's either the plains, the forests, or the mountains. It's just where naturally, by chance or by fate. I don't dislike the sea. It's a great place. I feel good about it, but there's no spiritual connection there for me.
Fair enough. Thank you for sharing your life stories and all the ways that have helped. There's so many great clues, right? This is the success nuggets. When we talk about diet, psychology, and spirituality, and nature, they come up time and time again. And I'm glad you're proving that. It was your mission that you went through the hardest conditions to prove these natural ways help us. But love. How can we define love in leadership? Take it away, what you're up to these days.
So I got to bring it back to another story in South Africa. See, I learned all of this from nature. Everything that I coach today has some level of biomimicry. And I get inspired when nature shows me. Nature is one of the most fascinating places because it's thriving with diversity and complexity. It's always increasing in evolution. That means it's really chaotic. But when you go out to nature, you don't feel that chaos. You feel that serene peace and, the chaos order dynamic that's in there. And that's fascinating because all life live harmoniously with one another, untouched, and they can still thrive in their individuality, their diversity, and complexity. But when it comes to human, you just look different, even though you're the same color. Somebody has judgment onto you, and they hated you, and so on and so forth. So, what is it about us being human that we are unable to accept complexity, diversity, and authenticity in others, and we can't create that harmonious relationship with one another? But nature can. But if we are nature, we can do as well. That I've learned from being in South Africa, right? You know the movie Lion King? when Mufasa is around showing Simba, this is the circle of life, and this is how things are, and your role as the king is to take care of the circle of life. And then Mufasa died, Scar took over, and basically there's an entire land was just died because the hyenas were overhunting and the whole land is barren. And then Simba, somewhere far away, comes back, fights Scar. He won, and then there was a rain, and then at the end, it shows that the entire ecosystem came back. Circle of life came back because Simba, the leader, came back to be the rightful king, the rightful ruler to govern the land. Now, that sounds like a fairy tale, right? Because it's cartoon. Then I found out that the wolves in the Yellowstone, when they're reintroduced to that space, because it was barren. And when the wolves were reintroduced, I think in the 1980s, I might get this wrong, the year wrong, something beautiful happened, and scientists, ecologists mentioned that it's something called trophic cascading. Because when the apex predator and the keystone species touch, goes back to the land where they're original from, the original habitat, they perceive and they saw the entire land regenerates on itself very, very quickly. It's even less than 10 years. Beavers came, river starts flowing, the valley starts thriving again, and then basically the circle of life starts kicking in, and there's an increasing diversity and complexity in that ecosystem. And it's so profound. Now, to me, that's great because I saw that on YouTube and I saw that on articles and science review, peer-reviewed journals, which is great. But that's just still a theory. I went to South Africa because I saw in my own eyes, right, when the white lions were in Timbavati, when they're governed in the land, that land is thriving in ecosystem, in diversity. And the other side of the land, because it's a guarded area to avoid illegal poaching, on the other neighboring side, it's a dead land. Because why? Right? Cut to kill industry, right? Trophy hunting industry, commoditizing of nature, it's kind of like Scar, right? Overhunting and overutilizing everything. So yeah, I saw and understand that trophic cascade happens in nature. Then the next question I asked myself, can it happen to my body? Which it did. In 2020, lockdown, I lost all access to my shamans, healers, to my spiritual teachers and everybody. And all I left is me. I have another flare up. I was like, why? I've tried everything. I've done everything. I'm the master healer now, but my body is still not showing signs of healing. So in that moment, I really called for a divine intervention. Like, hey, look, you brought me into this journey for a reason. You kicked me out from that narrative and you showed me a different life. And you got me to this point and you're telling me that I still can't heal. That was the internal dialogue during lockdown. And I was really contemplating to end my life because I've tried everything and it hurts. And it's like torture every single day, dealing with the skin, with the itch, with the showering and the open wounds. So I called for one last divine intervention because I truly believe I could communicate with something bigger than me. It came through with one word, forgiveness. And I was just like, holy shit, I think that I know what that means. It means that nothing outside of me is causing my disease. I'm the only one causing my own disease. I'm Scar to my own body. You see what I mean? So forgiveness is really this. I define it as forgiveness opens the door of the heart to all forms of love. You can try to love, but if you don't forgive yourself, your heart is closed and you're not really loving. And forgiveness is really radical acceptance of who you are and where you're at. That doesn't mean you give up and give in to what's there, but to let go of the understanding that something inside of you is broken, but to see deeply that you are already whole, complete. Forgiveness opened my heart. It cracked my heart open. And I was just like, oh my God, I started crying because of the universe's grace. And I was like, wow, thank you for this word. Because of this, I did not end my life. And I was just like, you have just regenerated my calling and my sense of meaning in life. And I believe to a certain degree, Viktor Frankl, in his book, Man's Search for Meaning, in the worst case in life, the Holocaust, he was able to find love and freedom in the worst situations. That's what he found inside of him while everybody and everything around him is suffering. And that was my experience, and that opened my heart to love is the trophic cascade for the body. Apex predator in nature is the trophic cascade for nature. And I was just thinking to myself, what about businesses? What about systems? What about politics? What about economics? Who are those people? CEOs, managers, executives, entrepreneurs. These are the people who need to come back to a remembrance to lead from a place of love so that they get out from the concept that leaders are individuals, but actually leaders are an ecosystem, to start seeing themselves not from an I perspective, but from a we perspective. And this trophic cascade in businesses, in economics, and politics will start to shift. Now the question remains, we all talk about love. Yes, it's a fluffy concept. It's amazing. It's beautiful. We see it in movies. It's romantic, and we romanticize the spiritual things as well. But what is it truly? What is it? What are the practical steps? And that's where I started going into the deep research of how do I make love practical? And this is when I started people like Gandhi, nonviolent protesting, create change, shifted an entire country. This is when I started people like Martin Luther King.
And Nelson Mandela.
Nelson Mandela, right? Exactly. Mother Teresa, Dalai Lama. They can still love even when, for example, Dalai Lama, he got kicked out by his country because of invasion. I can't imagine the hatred, the amount of pain and hurt and woundedness goes into that person. But yet, he's still striving as the holiness of compassion and love. So all of these things goes back to all the religions that we learn about. Buddhism, in Christianity, in Islam, and in Hinduism. I felt the calling in my life calling is to really unpack all these scriptures that we had from the past, all this ancient wisdom from the past, and how can I apply it in today's world where we are changing tremendously. Innovation and technology is increasing on the external world. But what about inner consciousness? What about our inner technology? And we risk extinction, to be honest, at this point. So are we going to be the leaders that is going to cascade regeneration spontaneously, or are we going to wipe ourselves out? So this work of leading with love is not just a fancy concept that I just want to share with the world. It's something that is urgent and that we need to apply because leaders today are burnt out. They're not making the best decisions. And these are parents teaching the next generations of kids and leaders, and we're not modeling the right way. I mean, that's a concern.
Yeah, absolutely got that. And it is urgent. Being bitter, it's too easy. Being caught up in everyone else's lives is not a mission for your health, for your business, for your relationships, for your community. I think you're a fantastic thought leader, Chiron.
Thank you.
We need more of this. What can leaders do before Friday based on some of your frameworks?
Yeah, let's make it simple when it comes to leading with love. If this concept is too fluffy for anybody listening to this, just think about emotional intelligence. I think that's more widely accepting. Emotional intelligence comes into three different perspectives. One is emotional awareness. Can you be aware of your emotions? Emotions drive our mindset, behaviors, actions, and choices. It drives everything. You can have your mindset training all you want. You can plan all your strategies all you want. But if it's driven from emotions of fear, domination, competitiveness, separation, and so on, it doesn't matter what you put up, right? And this is why emotional awareness is the first thing that you need to be aware of. Do you know that the recent studies, only 36% of people can exactly identify what emotions they're having in the situation they're in? Only 36%.
I can believe that. But we're taught being emotional is a bad thing.
Exactly.
Don't be emotional.
Repress it. You're right.
You know?
Exactly. But there's the emotional intelligence piece, right? Which is really helping us to actually bring us to our wisdom and our intuition and our the best version of who we are. So emotional awareness is definitely the first thing that you gotta be practicing. And after that is to build emotional resilience. How do you perform under stress, under duress? People lose themselves when they're triggered. It's like they're not who they are anymore. But just like any form of stress, it's like going to the gym. You can work out, you can be with it, you can stay in it. And when done in a proper way, you build emotional resilience. That means your prefrontal cortex can still be online and your best self can still be online and make executive decisions while you're under stress. Next, you'll develop emotional agility. And emotional agility is about how quick can you make those decisions that is so spot on. And this is where the top, I don't know how many percent, right, of entrepreneurs, leaders, captains of the team, they were able to make those decisions. But how do they make those decisions? It's definitely not through their intellect. It's through some deep knowing on the inside, whether you call it intuition or instinct. And that's something that we need to cultivate. And there's no way to cultivate the superpower of who we are, of intuition and instinct, if we do not accept, be aware and understand how emotions work. Because it's the emotional drive that leads us to see things. And by the way, 95% of our thoughts are subconscious, right? And subconscious really is driven by emotions. So if we repress it and say that emotions are bad, we are just only using 5% of our potential. So if you want to really perform really well at a high level, for all those listening right now, emotion, befriending it, building a relationship with it, it's not just going to turn you into a kinder, more compassionate person, but you're going to perform way, way, way better. There'll be less burnout. You'll find joy in everything that you do. And then eventually the profit and the performance will show.
Yeah. Honesty. And for anyone listening out there, whether you call it post-traumatic growth, or like Chiron said, there's something that's triggering you, then you're leading with either arrogance or ego or fear, probably fear more. I'm sure there's more good people than bad. I don't even like to say good or bad. That's a word. I don't know about you, but I've got 2 children, an 11-year-old and an 8-year-old, and I read up more about parenting all the time. And actually saying good and bad is a problem. I like the way you've tried to paint that picture. I like the way your handwriting's developing.
Yeah. Can I say something about that good and bad thing? Because this is super, super interesting. When I study the conscious and subconscious mind, when I understand it enough, it gives me so much compassion to humankind. You know how people sometimes can be idiots and they're frustrating and they're annoying and irritating. When we are triggered by our subconscious mind, even the best person, in the most compassionate, loving person, can do bad things. In Buddhism, there's a way they say about humans is that there's no bad humans. Everybody is fundamentally good. And when they say something is fundamentally good or basic goodness, it's saying that nature in itself, and this is where it speaks back to the nature of who we are. I truly believe there's a difference between human conditioning and human nature, and they're always fighting one another. Human nature is fundamentally good, and human conditioning is just the limited ways that we were brought up with. Maybe needs are not met, right? Maybe we experience something traumatic and fearful and scary, and then we develop some form of complex behaviors and personality that leads us to do funky things. I just put it that way, funky things. And this is where the good and evil, right, keeps starting to, within us, starts to fight. If everybody can learn how to process their emotions, because emotions is basically the bridge between the conscious and subconscious mind. Otherwise, we wouldn't have known what's going on in the subconscious. And emotions is actually a feedback. It's a messenger, not a problem. And we can learn how to understand that and process emotions effectively as human beings. I think a lot of us will be so much more kinder, more compassionate, and more intelligent, more conscious. And that whole dream that I see in nature where many different species thrive in complexity and diversity could live harmoniously for one another. If humans can remember this, I do believe that we can create a really beautiful, enlightened society on Earth. Yeah.
We can. Someone told me a line last week, I am love, so I am loving. And they have that mantra in front of them. I actually wrote a 2-page mantra myself a couple of weeks ago that I read that pulls me out. For anyone who wants to live in the moment but not get ruled by it, what could your first 3 steps be that maybe help you along the way that someone could adopt?
3 steps to live in the present moment?
But not be ruled by it.
Not be ruled by it. Okay. Well, number 1, be conscious of your breath. Breathe well, and your mind will be more peaceful. Number 2, protect your first hour of the morning. If you take the time to brush your teeth, to take your shower, then you have time to clean up your mental hygiene, your emotional hygiene. Whether it's affirmations, whether it's putting on a guided meditation, whether it's a walk in nature. Take that time to build a relationship with yourself because you're going to be so busy on the other day. So start your day right. The third thing, something that we don't often talk about mental and emotional health, is to take care of your body. Means eat well, right? Have good diet, eliminate processed food, go to the gym, work out, take care of yourself, and make sure you're hydrated. I'll say that People who are not hydrated, they're most of the time cranky. So sometimes you just need a drink of water, not some form of mental health solution. Isn't that funny? The simple things.
The water gets me every time. I can sit there at 3 o'clock and go, I've only drunk tea and coffee all day. I'm having a sip of water as we speak. I'll add on to that. When we talk about living with gratitude, the one line I teach my kids and for myself is if you don't live with gratitude, you're going to live with entitlement. So I hope that hits home. Listen, mate, the show time is up. I said we could speak for hours and hours and hours. And
Percent.
I know we could. Now I've got my one golden nugget is learn, change, grow. Do you have a one golden nugget?
I feel like my one golden nugget keeps changing depending on where I'm at in my journey. We don't know it all. And there's always a mystery to it. So this is my one golden nugget for now. I have a quote that I keep saying to myself, that the present moment is the moment of infinite possibilities.
Chiron, thanks for coming in. My mind is blown.
Thank you. Thank you.
And for the audience, look, Chiron's playbook is calm. It's based in action. It's rooted in history. He's dead right when he says nature doesn't really have a place for humans, and that's something we should crack. But try his exercises, connect with him, follow him, and continue to live the true life.
Join David and his incredible guests next time on the Success Nuggets podcast. And to find out more, visit onegoldennugget.com. Thank you for listening.